welcome to Combat Spuds, the weekly combat sports roundup brought to you by the Midweek Mashed Tattie Sportscast. My name is Course Mick, and as always, I'm joined by Harvey. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, dang it.
Well, if nothing else, Paul's still here.
Yes.
Harvey's AWOL, but Paul is here.
Indeed.
How are you feeling today, Paul?
I'm alright, pal. I'm alright. I couldn't find my roller skates, so I couldn't quite get out with Harvey for the roller skating trip. So I'm here to talk all things combat sports today. I have a fantastic question for you. I'm sure we'll go into very soon. Really go, my man. Really go.
Nice. So let's pull back the curtain entirely here. Harvey is currently AWOL. We hope that he is alive and doing well. He is probably sleeping. Hopefully he's doing well and he's just forgot to set an alarm and or his phone has died. But all going well, he should return to the podcast next week.
Absolutely.
So, without further ado, let's get it on. Now, two wee things to cover before we get in about the news and the recaps. The first thing is that you might have noticed that we've not had a fight from the archives for the last few weeks. Due to the sort of changes and improvements that we're trying to make here, it just, more often than not, there's not enough time left in an episode for to do a watch along, fight for the archives at the end. So, what I've decided to do is we're going to say sort of farewell, with a heavy heart. I say farewell to Fight with the Archives from the podcast for now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an ongoing blog series on my website. So that's midweekmashedtattie.com. You can find the blog in the menu at the top, or you can just go to the midweekmashedtattie.com/blog. There will be a series of blogs there titled Fight from the Archives. And what I'll try and do is embed YouTube videos or put a link to a YouTube video or whatever there. Potentially, as the series goes on, I might start putting in fights that you'll find on UFC Fight Pass. If you happen to have the subscription, you'll be able to watch them. But nevertheless, there'll be a fight at the top, and then I'll give a bit of a description of what happened in the fight, how the fight came about, my thoughts on the fight, that sort of thing. So if you're interested in that content, it will still live on in the blog. And from time to time, when there's time in an episode, we'll bring it back in. And we'll enjoy a classic fight when we can. The other quick thing is that I alluded last week to another potential big change for the podcast for Combat Spuds. Basically, that change is that I'm looking to change the name of Spuds. I'm looking to change it from Combat Spuds to something that includes MMA in the title, right? It's no secret that I'm an MMA fan first, beyond the rest of sports, basically. That's my number one sport that I love. But I'm definitely a combat sports aficionado, geek, whatever word you want to insert there. So I'm never going to talk about big fights that are happening in other combat sports, but the focus of this podcast series for me, Combat Spuds as it's currently titled, is always going to be on MMA. And then big stuff that's happening in other combat sports will filter in from time to time. So if anybody out there has got a suggestion for what the name may be, I would love to hear it. And so much so that I will actually offer a reward of a £10 Amazon voucher, right? If somebody can suggest to me a name that I end up using, I will send you an Amazon e-voucher, right? I'll get your email address, I'll send you the link, you'll get a £10 voucher if I decide to use the name. So the only prerequisites is that, stipulations or whatever would be the correct terminology there, is that it should include MMA or mixed martial arts, so a reference to MMA, and ideally the word mash to be in line with the other episodes here on the Midweek Mashed Tattie. However, I would accept any puns related to potatoes if they're funny and clever. Right. So, with that in the books, let's move on to the breaking news, the news stories of the week. The first thing, Paul, is just a wee kind of a note on the knock-on effect that the conflict in Ukraine is having on the combat sports world. So I don't want to belittle the atrocity and the war that's happening over there and the plight of the Ukrainian people.
No, that's all.
You know, I mean, if a fight gets cancelled because there's a war happening, then that is absolutely like first world problems. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? The lives that have been lost over there is what really matters. But with that being said, I want to just have a quick look at what's going to be cancelled, what might be cancelled, changes that might be happening due to what's going on. So there's currently a few Ukrainian nationals that have gone back or were already there that are basically fighting for their country. So you've got the likes of the Klitschko brothers, obviously both retired from boxing. You've got Lomachenko, boxer. You've got Alexander Usyk, boxer, who have both went back and they're fighting. And then there's also the Bellator welterweight champion, Amasov. He's now went back to Ukraine to fight as well. So just that in itself obviously has a knock on. Obviously Alexander Usyk in talks to go ahead with the immediate rematch with Anthony Joshua. So that's very much left up in the air. Whether that fight happens now, I don't know. It will depend how Usyk gets on over there and how long the war goes on and stuff. I don't know. You'd imagine that the boxing organisations would show compassion to him.
I would hope so.
After enough time passes, they'll need to at the very least do like an interim champion or something. So,
I was going to suggest that that's probably the most kind of common sense. I mean, I know we don't like the interim thing being coming in and sort of the likes of boxing and MMA and that, but in this situation, I think for the very foreseeable future, I think pressure going off of these Ukrainian guys and girls to be held accountable for the schedule that was pre-war. Like, it's unfair.
You can't be mad at somebody for wanting to defend their country in this kind of situation.
It is a once-in-a-lifetime sort of situation going on over there where their country is being invaded by an aggressive foreign threat. And they have their family, they have their kids, friends. Their lives, essentially, are over there. Obviously, when we're talking about the Klitschkos, I believe it's Vitaly who's the mayor of Kiev, isn't it?
Correct, aye.
Aye, so I mean, I can't put any words how sorry I feel for these folk. Like, it's a horrible situation. It really is.
Absolutely, man.
Sport, unfortunately, just does take a backseat when it comes to this kind of stuff, doesn't it, mate? Like,
Aye, that's it. It's as much as it's competitive and it's this and it's that and the next thing. Ultimately, it's a form of entertainment. You know what I mean? That's a sport. I mean, going back, a call back to our Olympic episode back in the day, talking about what makes a sport a sport. Ultimately, a sport is just a physical activity that's entertaining and that people want to watch in its most simplest form. So, it's a form of entertainment that absolutely takes a backseat when something like what a conflict such as this is taking place. So, I mean, you've also, as I mentioned, Lomachenko's over there. So, he's been on course to challenge Kambosos Jr.
That's right.
So, most likely Kambosos will fight somebody else this year, I would think. I don't think the Lomachenko fight will be next for him. I mean, I dare say Lomachenko will have his chance when he's ready to come back, and assuming he does come back to boxing.
Hopefully
but
one day he does, aye.
It's a slightly different situation there because he's not currently champ. As I mentioned, Yaroslav Amasov, the Bellator welterweight champ, he's went back to fight. He's scheduled to fight in May at Bellator London. He's supposed to defend his title against MVP, Michael Venom Page.
Right.
So whether or not that fight happens, I don't know.
Maybe MVP moves on to an interim kind of short now.
Possibly, aye. I don't know. They might try and move the fight initially. Maybe say that, they'll give him to the summer or something like that.
I think that would be the respectful way to do it, is to allow a wee bit of a delay before they go down the road. I mean, interim championships and so on and so forth, I think have to be a later, kind of medium to long term option. But currently, I think you need to just show a bit of sort of
show the compassion
and say, listen, it's all right. Just don't even
absolutely.
think about it. Don't worry about it.
The other thing, it's kind of the on the flip side, there are a number of Russian fighters who, regardless of their political leanings, they have fights scheduled or they're trying to get fights booked, but they're now in limbo because the sanctions that have been placed on Russia means that it's going to be very difficult for these guys to get visas to go to other countries and fight if they're not already living and training in said country. So the biggest one that's coming up very soon is the UFC London on March the 19th. The main event is supposed to be Alexander Volkov against Tom Aspinall. Right. At this point, it is unknown if Volkov is going to be able to get a visa to come over. So I've got no idea where he stands in the conflict, and it doesn't really matter too much at this point. I'm just pointing out the fact that, you know what I mean, if he is supposed to be fighting, I don't know if he can. You know what I mean? It might be time for the UFC to look at a replacement opponent.
I think they were talking about they're looking at a kind of backup plan, was what Dana White said. They're trying. I'm sure at the press conference he'd says we're working on things in case.
Just
in case we need to. And his response is, we're always working on these things. We're very good at kind of dealing with these sort of situations if there needs. And they are, to be fair, like there's very few times you'll see a card cancelled because they haven't worked out like an alternative.
I think twice in company history they've cancelled a full card.
I mean, and that is an incredible record when you consider kind of boxing's history towards cancellations. Like they are very good.
One of them was just basically to spite John Jones. If we're being honest.
So one honest cancellation and one political cancellation. Political as in intra organisation.
I can't remember. Politics. It was a pay-per-view. I don't remember what number the event was. But John Jones was scheduled to fight somebody. I don't remember who. And said somebody picked up an injury and couldn't fight. The UFC then offered a replacement opponent. John Jones, well within his rights, refused that opponent. So in retaliation, the UFC just cancelled the card.
Pulled the full event. Aye.
So
no pay.
It couldn't happen. But the UFC, they're good at coming up with a plan B and C. So
I would imagine considering Priti Patel kind of said that any Russians will not be allowed to compete on UK soil, I think was her kind of quote. I'm surmising it there, I've had.
Aye.
And you look at the likes in Formula One where Nikita Mazepin was told that he could not race in Formula One. Thus, his team is now active. I mean, we'll go into that in next match, I'm sure.
Right.
But that's due to the kind of the restrictions on entering the UK if you're a Russian national. So
yeah, absolutely.
I imagine it's going that way.
Can't see him being able to get in and fight. But
see
what happens.
Yeah, can only see him, man.
Right. So moving on, we've got a bit of I suppose that story there kind of crossed the borders of boxing and MMA, as does this next story. So Tyson Fury was recently on the MMA Hour being interviewed by Ariel Helwani, sort of famed MMA journalist, and he was talking quite openly and candidly about his sort of his career, the future of his career, the rest of his career, whatever you would call it. And he's basically stated that he fully intends to retire from competitive boxing, professional boxing, after his fight with Dillian Whyte. So I've got a few quotes here that I'll read through and then we can talk about it. This is my retirement fight. 100,000 people at Wembley, all British world title fight. Return of the Mac after 4 years to the UK. This is it. Going out in a high, retiring on top. 2-time world heavyweight champion, and I'll have made 8 defences of the lineal championship. Never to lose a fight. To go down as only the second heavyweight in history to retire unbeaten. Me and Rocky Marciano. So he's talking about being basically content with what he's achieved in boxing, and saying that he's got nothing left to prove, he's looking to retire. Hawaii then asked him about obviously there's been a bit of hubbub about Francis Ngannou, the potential of the two of them having a match. But obviously Ngannou having his ongoing issues with the UFC, plus now he's got a knee injury to deal with. So in response to that, he says, I don't count that as a real boxing fight. That's not a boxing fight. That's going to be a special fight. That will be in a cage in 4-ounce gloves in Las Vegas at the Raiders Stadium. I will have retired from competitive championship boxing and I'll be ready to do the crossover fights completely. He won't be the UFC heavyweight champion anymore. I won't be the WBC heavyweight champion anymore, but I will still be the lineal heavyweight champion because they can't take that from me. We've got Francis Ngannou. He's a big guy, a big dangerous guy. I'd love to see people going on, oh, it's not a fair fight in 10-ounce gloves, and that's correct. It wouldn't be a fair fight in 10-ounce gloves because, like Cormier said recently, he said that Francis Ngannou is a much cruder version of Deontay Wilder, and we all know what happened there. So I think if we're going to do 4-ounce gloves, he'd have a bit more chance of knocking me out. But then again, I'd have a bit more chance of knocking him out also. So it makes for an exciting fight. And I'll try to come in at my heaviest for that fight. I'll try to come in over 300 pounds just to nail him to the canvas with one solid punch. So it's just Fury being Fury there, isn't it?
That's very much a Fury being Fury into that quote.
What's your immediate thoughts of that? The idea of him retiring but having sort of exhibition fights, if you like? I don't know if that matches up with who he is as a character. And theoretically speaking, would you be content with that sort of record to retire to, that amount of defences, lineal championship, as he says? I think any fighter would be very proud to retire with that. Mm-hmm. Him, though, I don't know if that would satisfy him. I think that he must still want to have this kind of big blockbuster fight in him with the likes of Joshua, with the likes of Usyk, to be an undisputed champion. I think there must be a want for him still to be able to say that he's a lineal undisputed champion. And I'm surprised that he's saying that. I don't know if that's about a sort of media grandstanding to create a bit of buzz of, oh, he can't go yet, surely he's not wanting to go. Like a bit, for maybe it's to leverage a bit more money in his part, because if he's saying he's wanting out, then does it become more valuable? I read two things into this. One, the way he's talking about his boxing career, I think that the driving force behind him wanting to fight Anthony Joshua was the challenge and the legacy. The fact that he wanted to be known clearly as the best of his generation and the best British boxer of all time, best heavyweight British boxer of all time, potentially. So I think for him, he had to beat Joshua to do that. But because Anthony Joshua's now lost twice, I think he feels like some of the esteem has been taken away from Joshua and he doesn't have so much to prove by beating him now.
I mean, that I agree with.
Would be relatively fair. Mm-hmm. And then I think the other thing is that, to me, this says that he's really, really keen on the Francis Ngannou fight, because there's two things that would derail that fight for happening. One is Dana White in the UFC and the contract negotiations there. And the second thing is getting Ngannou approved by whatever, well, in this case, it would be, WBC?
Aye.
Aye. So
the boxing boards.
It would be getting him approved by WBC as a challenger to his title if Fury was going in as a champion and it was a full-on boxing match. So I think him saying that he would basically retire for boxing and go and do this as a standalone special event, I think that's him saying, like, let's take all the variables away and let's just go and make some money.
I mean, that's aye. There's an argument for that too, I suppose.
He's clearing the way for the fight to happen.
it would make money, like it would be. The theoretical question of who's the bigger puncher, who's the
skill versus power.
Aye. And I mean, he's answered that emphatically already in his career with a boxer, of the skill versus power argument with Wilder.
Yep.
It's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I want to take what he's saying at face value and say that he's speaking honestly. Mm-hmm. However, he's also an incredible salesman himself.
Mm-hmm.
Probably one of the best in modern boxing as far as self-promotion goes.
Yep.
Just by what he's saying, like, just by him, like, if he talks publicly, everybody's listening.
Mm-hmm.
We're all like, it's news. The minute he opens his mouth, it's news. Yep. We're all talking about it. He has that sort of impact in the sport, not just in the boxing world, but in sport in general. Like,
yep.
he is seen as that big a deal. So, I mean, is he got a history for kind of being a bit of a salesman in the past for you? Like, does he say things that he did, well, like, historically? I mean, to me, he's usually quite honest, isn't he?
He is very honest, and he's retired once before. He said it, he did it, he meant it. A lot of that was down to mental health at the time.
That's true.
But, you know what I mean? He said that he had nothing left to prove. He was walking away on top. He needed to go and sort himself out. And he was totally true to his word. He did that. He handed the titles back and away he went. He obviously did eventually realise that he still had a hankering for it. He still wanted to prove himself. He still wanted to prove to himself that he could come back and do it. So he came back and he's had a few more fights, and obviously very successfully. So I think actually it speaks to me that he's in a healthier place now, because he's making a similar decision, but rather than it being based on his own mental health and needing to just get away from the spotlight, it's him acknowledging that he wants to go and have massive legacy building fights, make a ton of money, sell out an arena, and he's not got anything left to prove in boxing, so why be tied down to the rules and regulations and the politics that goes along with that? You know what I mean? He's in that kind of place, that mental space where he can be content with his career and he can just
no longer needs it as such. So,
I mean, obviously you could read into it that it is showmanship and that he's not actually going to retire. He's just trying to create a bit of a buzz around the Dillian Whyte fight, because obviously if that's looked at as legitimately being a retirement fight for him, more people are probably going to tune in for it.
Aye, because I mean, we were speaking as well about the kind of the star power of Dillian Whyte not being anywhere near comparable to the likes of Deontay Wilder or Anthony Joshua. Well, I mean, obviously, as I've said before on here, I root for Dillian Whyte a wee bit because he is the unfashionable guy in that kind of in this kind of era. Certainly, he's got a hugely positive record. He's took a lot of difficult fights on to get where he is, and kind of persevered like in a lot of ways. But he isn't fashionable, so this puts a bit of excitement in this fight now. Is this his last fight? Does he go out on a high?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's
we've a few weeks to wait and find out. It's what, March, the fight?
Yep.
Aye, so it's not that far away, so interested to see what comes out between now and the fight and the lead up to it, see if he reiterates the retirement talk and interviews that he'll no doubt do. There'll be probably another press conference or two in the lead up, so interested to see what comes.
What a skull for Whyte if he puts him out on his final fight.
That's another question as well. If he does,
a superstar out of Whyte potentially.
If he legitimately intends this to be his retirement fight, but Whyte can pull off the upset and get the win, does he then go for an immediate rematch? Does he continue to box to get that win back? So, many a question.
Many questions.
Speaking of questions, Paul, have you got a question coming out of that burning desire that I can see coming up in flames over there?
Oh. It is a flaming, burning desire once again, my man. A bonfire of questions, as it were.
I was wondering where you were going to go with that.
Wasn't sure where I was going. I went into it kind of full-blooded without any idea I was finishing it, but here I'm here. So, I was watching the UFC last night, obviously, and it was your man Greg Hardy, the ex-NFL player, who obviously we'll talk about it. I think he lost his fight.
Spoiler alert.
And my question for you was, when is it too late to come across from another sport and just pick up MMA? Can it ever be done? Is there an age that's better for it? Obviously, Hardy came over, I think, was it in his early 30s? Was he 30 years old?
He would have been 32, maybe.
So he's very late to the game, and it's came with obviously mixed success. I think that loss last night puts him to 7-5 in the UFC. Been very busy since he came across, but it's been very mixed. I think it's probably the best way to describe it.
Yep.
So when's too late for that? Can it be ever done? Is it down to just an individual? What do you think? Can a sportsman ever conceivably transition into MMA?
It's all in the variables. It really is a case-by-case basis. Unless you're an absolute freak athlete who comes from a transferable sport, it's a very, very difficult transition to pull off anywhere beyond early 20s. It takes so much time to learn all the facets of MMA properly and fully to be a complete fighter, that unless you have some kind of quality about you to give yourself a step up, you're going to have a very difficult time making it to the sort of utmost echelons of the sport. A guy like Brock Lesnar coming over, you're talking about 1% of the 1% in terms of being a freak athlete. You're also talking about somebody with a collegiate wrestling background.
That's what I was just going to point to, is that he has a transferable skill that helps, doesn't he?
He ticks a box, and he's a freak athlete. He's a big, strong, powerful guy that he moves surprisingly, shockingly fast. And he's got that wrestling background. That's a fantastic platform to build a fighter off of, with the right coaches, the right training. But if you take somebody who was a wrestler, a really, really high level wrestler, even in like college in America or whatever, but then they go and they just work a mundane office job for 20 years, and they're out of shape, they're no longer the athlete they once were, they haven't practiced the wrestling skills in years, and then you try and turn them into an MMA fighter, it's going to be hard. You know what I mean? Just having a background or just being an athlete isn't enough. It's a very difficult thing to do. When you look at like wrestling, if they don't have a wrestling background, to ever get to a point where you can compete with a high level wrestler is a hard ask, let alone try to do it in a short period of time. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there is a reason that if you can get a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in less than 7-8 years, you're a prodigy. Most people that get a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's taken them over 10 years to achieve a black belt.
Well, it's been a lifetime, so
it's
path towards it.
It's no an easy martial art to really master. And there's so many different things that goes into MMA that it really is hard to imagine somebody like Greg Hardy ever being world class. The thing that has got him by is that he's such a big, massive unit. A guy who is, again, a bit of a freak athlete. You know what I mean? He's an outlier. He's a 6'5", 300-pound monster. So he's going to hit hard. He moves faster than a guy that size should. But even still, we've seen that that's not enough. You know what I mean?
No.
He's fell when anytime he goes against anybody with any experience, he's struggling. Tries to strike with Tuivasa, gets knocked out. Tries to grapple with Spivak, doesn't go well. Spivak ragdolls him. Even with the size difference, he ragdolls him, and he gets into a good position, gets into him out, beats him down. That's the fight done. He got submitted for, was it Olenek or one of the old school grapplers submitted him as well.
Volkov it was.
Was it Volkov that got him?
Decision for Volkov. Tybura, TKO, punches, Tuivasa, KO, Spivak, TKO. That's his losses. Obviously, Alan Crowder as well. That was a DQ though, however.
Right, okay.
That was
that's when he is.
Need a down opponent.
No. He's asthmatic, so in between rounds he took a puff of his inhaler, which you're not allowed today for obvious reasons.
That's right, aye.
So dumbass. But I mean the thing. Let's not get into that. But So the long and the short it is, it depends. It's very unlikely for anybody over 25. Say, that's a bit of an arbitrary number, but it's a relatively good ballpark. Anybody over 25, unless they have a strong background in a combat sport of some description, including wrestling and different martial arts, obviously, or they're a freak among freaks in terms of their athletic ability, they're going to have a hard time transitioning.
One thing I'll point to with him is that he seems to have been this all sport fantastically. He was a 3-sport athlete during like high school and college, basketball, American football, and track. But
right.
I mean, for me, if you look at it in the face of it, he's been a defensive end for years in American. In American football, to me, you're a one-task player unless you're a quarterback. Like, you do one job for your career. Push forwards is basically his life as a defensive end. Push forward, attack the quarterback. Push forward. That's his repetitive job, year in, year out. So I can see how that makes him very limited getting into a world where there are these. I mean, MMA in itself you're a multi-sport athlete. But it's all fight athletes, so it's aye.
You could argue into the end of time what the ratio is for the ultimate fighter between skill and athletic ability, but regardless of what that ratio is, you always need both to be successful. Somebody like Greg Hardy can come in as a supreme athlete and tick all the athletic boxes, but he still has to learn the skills, or he's just not going to be successful. So, no, that's the crux of it. So,
fair enough, mate.
Moving on up, really only the one big thing happening in terms of combat sports this week. We had UFC. So it was UFC 272, pay-per-view headlined by the grudge match between Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal. Overall, initial thoughts, cracking night of fights.
Agreed.
We had quite a mix of stuff happening. The undercard was kind of littered by up-and-comers, potential future title contenders. There was a wee bit of a theme of kind of bad blood and storylines laced through the main card. So it was a kind of interesting dynamic they had going on with the booking of the fights this week. A couple of kind of stories going into it. You had Kevin Holland debuting in welterweight, stepping down from middleweight for the first time. He's somebody that's kind of spoke before about going to welterweight in the future. He doesn't like cutting weight for one reason or another, so he's preferred to be at middleweight where he cuts very little weight on fight week. He just basically gets in shape for the fight and then he's very close to being 185. He doesn't have to cut much weight at all. So now he's moving down to welterweight, fighting at 170, so he's got that bit of weight cutting to do. He did say after his fight though that he didn't feel tired at all. He was nervous that the weight cut would take it out of him, but he felt fresh, so seems to have settled in well. The other thing was Rafael dos Anjos in the co-main event. He was supposed to be fighting Rafael Fiziev, but due to Fiziev contracting COVID, that fight fell through, and Renato Moicano stepped in in his place. So the fight obviously was supposed to be a lightweight fight, but it's ended up going ahead as a catchweight £160 fight. But the most interesting thing for me was that when RDA and Fiziev was originally booked, it was going to be the main event of, I don't remember.
Oh, right, okay.
It was supposed to be the main event in one of the recent Vegas cards.
Aye. So an Apex show. But
I think through travel issues for Fiziev, I think that was the problem. They pushed the fight back a couple of weeks. So it ended up being the co-main event on 272 this week. But with the fight already being booked as a 5-round main event fight, they decided to honour that contract for one reason or another. So it was a 5-round co-main event. Even more interesting than that is that then after Fiziev falls out and they bring Moicano in to replace him, who, no for nothing, is a featherweight, stepping up, not to lightweight at £155, but stepping all the way up to £160 for a catchweight fight at the last minute, they still elected to keep it as a 5-rounder, which I found really strange. It's the first time they've done that. Before now, the only 5-round non-title and non-main event fight was the Nate Diaz and drawing a blank. Who did Nate Diaz fight?
Would it be Masvidal?
Masvidal? No, because that was for the BMF title.
Technically.
Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards.
Oh, so Leo, aye, right, okay.
Because that was a co-main event because it was another one. It was supposed to be the main event, but then they brought a title fight in as the main event.
That's right.
So they kept it as a 5-rounder. So strange situation. But anyway, let's quickly run through the fights. So obviously, Paul, I'm assuming you've seen some of the fights or highlights.
I've caught up on kind of the big hits, as it were, the kind of pay-per-view. Okay.
So, opening the night, we had Dustin Jacoby and Mikhail Oleksiuk, something along the lines. Why do they have to have hard names? So that was a fun fight, decision win there for Dustin Jacoby to open the night. They made Ludwig Klein picking up a win over Devontae Smith. That one was a split decision. It was a bit closer. Again, decent fight. Nothing majorly to write home about, but a decent fight. Then our first really good scrap of the night was Tim Elliott and Tagir Ulanbekov. Really, really good fight. A few different things happening in there that was interesting. Tim Elliott getting accused of fighting a wee bit dirty. A couple of times the way he was grabbing at the hands of Tagir, his thumb was like kind of hooking in the glove. It was hard to tell whether or not he was doing it deliberately.
Right, okay.
But it was almost like he was like sort of looping his thumb in there and grabbing the glove so that he could, he couldn't use that hand. It was kind of weird. And then also a low blow or two. I think maybe an eye poke. So it was a wee bit of a rough fight, but it was a good scrap back and forth. The judges' scorecards. Oh no, it wasn't that. I'm thinking of a different one. So the judges had it unanimously for Tim Elliott, but it was a close fight. It was back and forth. Next up, we had Umar Nurmagomedov, cousin of Habib, picking up quite the easy victory, I think I'd say, over Brian Kelleher. This
was one of the ones I checked on this early prelim, and it was routine. I think would be the best way to describe it, wasn't it, man?
It was almost like a kind of training session, wasn't it?
A formality, I think, as well. Once you get these hooks in, that you knew which way it was going to
go. On the feet, Kelleher had a chance, but Nurmagomedov was still getting better at it, I would say, on the feet. And then, as soon as he got hold of him, caught him down, got his hooks in, it was one-way traffic.
Mm-hmm.
From there, we had a really fun fight. Marina Moros and Maria Agapova. Agapova's one that I was quite high on after her UFC debut. Still think she's very talented and she's got a high ceiling, but Moros actually picked up the victory here via an arm triangle in the second round. The first round was quite back and forth. It was, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It was just a fun fight. It had a bit of everything in it.
Certainly looking at the percentage of strikes landed, high percentages.
Aye, they were very active.
Landed very busy fight for how long it went.
It was just there's no big standout moment or anything. It was just a fun fight, back and forth. Aye. We then had Nikolai Nagumarunu. Nagumarunu. I don't know. Nikolai picking up a victory over Kennedy Shikuwu.
I swear somebody put that in there to bam you up, man, for pronunciation. I should.
Hard names, but nevertheless, good fighters.
Quite heavyweight thing.
So, split decision win there for Nikolai. Next up, we had another women's fight with Marina Rodriguez and Yan Jianan. This one was a bit of a unofficial kind of number one contenders thing. I think Rodriguez came in as like third or fourth ranked at strawweight, and then Yan Jianan was just below that. And then you've got Joanna Jędrzejczyk is out now, she's not back yet, and Carla Esparza is due to fight Rose Namajunas, who's the champion. So these are kind of like the next ladies in line at strawweight, so more or less whoever wins here was kind of due to, or is very likely to be the next contender at strawweight. So it was a really, really fun back and forth fight. It had a bit of everything. I really enjoyed that one. Pretty close, I'd say. I mean, it'd maybe be a hard argument to say that Jan won it, but if that's the way the fight went, I wouldn't have been mad at it. It was a close fight.
So a correct decision nonetheless.
I think so. I think for me, Rodriguez won. There wasn't much in it. You know, it was 29-28. So, aye, it was a close fight. I'm not mad at the outcome. But it's almost like they kind of both deserved to move up in the rankings a wee bit off the back of it. So I feel for Jan a wee bit, but I'd say Rodriguez was a worthy winner. But I highly recommend that one. It was a really fun fight. Had a bit of everything in it. You had the hand speed and the output of Yan Jianan, and then the sort of clinical, powerful striking of Rodriguez. So it was kind of different sort of styles, different approaches, but made for a really entertaining fight. You then had, capping off the undercard, you had Jalen Turner and Jamie Malarkey. That was a really good fight and a really good showing from Turner. Malarkey is no joke. He is really good. He was very highly touted coming into UFC. Like 2 years ago he debuted. He hasn't fought, I think, in over a year. These two were supposed to fight at the last Australia card, I think it was.
Oh, it's a pandemic issue, essentially. Aye,
so it was derailed.
Am I right? Malarkey's Australian, just judging by the shorts colour, green and yellow.
Yep. So I think travel issues and whatever else has held him back, and I'm pretty sure. Turner's fought once, I think, since that fight was originally meant to happen. But anyway, nonetheless, they went back to this booking, and for good reason. It was a really fun fight.
Oh, definitely.
I was very impressed with Jalen Turner. He seemed to be almost in cruise control in the first round. But even when he had Malarkey hurt, he was never in a hurry, taking his time, doing the right things. And then second round, turned up the gas, and then only took him. It didn't take a ton of effort. So I'm trying to say, like, even when he turned up the gas, he wasn't swinging for the fences. You know what I mean? It was very clinical. I was just really impressed with Turner, man. Really good finish as well in that second round.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
fantastic punch to floor him, man.
Yep. So I think it was just a straight left, I think. Straight left.
Straight right. Straight right hand to the jaw, I think.
So straight punch drops him, and then I just clinically finished him on the floor. So, aye. So that's a name to remember there. Jalen Turner. Very impressed there. Main card opened with Sergey Spivak and Greg Hardy. So the fight we previously alluded to. Basically, it was Hardy looking menacing on the feet, swinging big kicks, big punches. The leg kicks looked like they were bloody sore, but Spivak ate them. First chance he got, 30 seconds or so into the fight, he got a hold of Hardy. They sort of hustled and tussled for a minute, and then Spivak hit a really good sort of hip toss, head and arm throw. Something that Ronda Rousey would be proud of back in the day. And Greg Hardy went down like a bloody tree that had been felled, man. When he got flipped over the hip, he went, it was an awful thud. And then it was just one-way traffic for there, man. Greg Hardy just had nothing for him in terms of the ground game.
So for that experiment to end, do you think he'll be back in the UFC?
I think we'll probably see him once more, and then depending on how that goes, that could very well be the last of him. I think, thinking about it, he would have a better time in Bellator.
Aye, where the heavyweights are just that wee level below.
The skill level's just a wee bit lower in Bellator heavyweight division overall.
I mean, Jake Hager in the top 10 of Bellator tells the story itself, really. He's had 3 fucking fights. Against bouncers.
There's no guarantees that he would go over there and be a champion or anything, but I think Scott Coker and his team would be fairer to him in terms of pitting him against opponents with the similar kind of experience and skill set to him.
There's a bit more favourable booking of fights there, isn't there? Like,
the Bellator falls into almost the kind of Japanese kind of outlook in terms of booking fights, the way Pride did it, the way Rising's done it, where they're looking for the attractions and they're booking them into fights that's winnable for them, so that they can build names, build attractions. So I think he would be a better fit over there. Whether it gets more or less money, I don't know. Whether it prolongs his career or his chances at being a champion, I don't know. But I think just in terms of winning fights and more winnable fights, it's maybe an idea for him to entertain the notion of going there if his contract's due to end, or if indeed he gets let go by the UFC.
Aye.
Right, next up in the main card, we had Kevin Holland in a really fun fight with Alex Oliveira. Second round TKO win for Kevin Holland. I was impressed. So obviously I mentioned this is Holland debuting at welterweight. I'd say it was the bigger guy against Oliveira, but not by that much. You know what I mean? It didn't really look like there was a big disparity there. It wasn't like, oh, this is a welterweight versus a middleweight. It just looked like Holland was a slightly bigger welterweight. So he fits well there. Oliveira's, he's very fast, very skillful. He's a good all-rounder. So it was a good test to see where Holland's at in the welterweight division. And I'd say he pretty much passed with flying colours. He started quite slow. Oliveira, to his credit, had a good game plan, it would seem, for the start of the fight.
Yeah, I mean, he does. He looks... I'm a huge fan of Kevin Holland anyway. I like the kind of personality of the guy. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something there with him. So fingers crossed that you kind of see him now kind of going and put a wee kind of stamp in that division.
Aye.
We see him in some kind of big fights soon. He looked good, I've got to say, though.
Mm-hmm. I would say that he's got a kind of star quality about him. He's good in an interview. You know what I mean? He sort of looks good, talks good. So if he can string a few wins together, I think he can. I think we could see him being fast tracked to a title shot.
Possibly,
if he can win the right fights. So, I was impressive by the finish. I was impressive. I was impressed by the finish. So, looking forward to see where he goes next. The next one was I've got mixed feelings about it. Bryce Mitchell and Edson Barboza. I don't know if you were able to catch this one, Paul.
This one I didn't know, unfortunately. This one I haven't quite caught up with.
So Basically, it was similar to the main event, which we'll come on to. Edson Barboza, although he's a good grappler, he's very much a striker. He's looking to strike here. Bryce Mitchell, Thug Nasty as he's called, is all about the wrestling and the grinding. So it was more or less 3 rounds of Bryce Mitchell hitting takedowns on Barboza and then been all over him. A ton of ground strikes in this fight. Bryce Mitchell is very active on the ground. To his credit, I must say, he's no just hitting a takedown and then holding the guy there. He's really
just wrestle fuck. He's
really active with strikes. He's not always looking to necessarily improve his position, go for submissions. Sometimes he's quite content to just be in guard, be in the guy's full guard or half guard, and just pepper them with shots. But he's active. He's always working. So it doesn't make for a massively exciting fight. Well, I can be honest about that, but especially if you're not really into the wrestling and the grappling. But you can't take away from him that he's active and he's landing strikes, even on the ground. So, aye. It wasn't the funnest fight in the card, but
one of the fights.
It was a solid unanimous decision for Mitchell. There wasn't any doubt that he had won that. I mean, so much so that one of the judges gave a 10-8 round and another judge gave 2 10-8 rounds.
Right, so pretty comprehensive then. Really,
it was quite clear who won, albeit just not in the most entertaining way, I guess.
Aye. It's unfortunate that that's how it is with kind of wrestler kind of type fighters, that it doesn't. It's no fun to watch for your standard kind of casual.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Then that takes us on to the co-main event of the evening. It was Rafael dos Anjos and Renato Moicano, as we spoke about. This one wasn't without controversy. After the third round, Moicano was... Well, I mean, the fight was basically on the verge of being stopped in the third round.
With good reason.
Aye. Rafael dos Anjos booted 7 shades of shite out of Moicano. He really did give him a bleaching. Moicano started strong, but it quickly became clear that dos Anjos was just that bit better and stronger everywhere.
It was dominant, I think. To use, if you one word to describe how dos Anjos performed, dominant.
Yep.
There was never a doubt.
To Moicano's credit, he never gave up. He was always moving, looking to defend, looking to attack, but he just didn't have the answers for RDA. So then in the third round, dos Anjos had Moicano down, and he was just beating the shit out of him, really. And I mean, he had him rocked. And I really thought the fight should have been stopped in the third round. Moicano is moving, he's looking about, he was trying to grab a hold of RDA, but I don't know that it was enough.
I feel like he thought he was going to be stopped.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was waiting for the end at that point in the fight.
Possibly, aye.
I mean, he's trying to keep himself safe, but he's offering nothing in return at a certain point in that third round. Mm-hmm. Aye, nothing coming back. So I think he expected it to be stopped, and then obviously it's allowed to continue.
Yeah.
Right decision or wrong decision for you?
For me, wrong. I think...
Wrong.
I don't think Moicano needed to take the damage that he took in the last 2 rounds. I think
it's needless.
I think if that was a 3-rounder, he's moving enough to survive. There's no long left in the fight. Let him go out in his shield kind of thing.
Mm.
But being that it was a 5-rounder, it was very clear at that point what way the fight was going. It was in a position where he wasn't able to offer any offence, even if he was borderline just about intelligently defending himself. But, I mean, even that, you could argue that he wasn't. So,
needless for you.
For me, it was needless punishment for there. I was very impressed by Mark Goddard, the referee, and the way that he handled it in the 4th and 5th round. He was making sure the doctor was checking on him. He was very clear going into the 5th round specifically. He clearly stated to Moicano, I'm giving you 30 seconds in here to turn this fight around and show me that you can defend yourself. and Moicano did have a much better fifth round than he had third or fourth, but ultimately it was never going his way. There was just no need for him to be taking the punishment. I'm more annoyed and disappointed in his cornerman than anything else. I feel like they should have been put.
Aye, surely the responsibility kind of comes in them.
Yep.
Like, he's clearly losing the fight. What's the point? Like, at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. So
I mean, that's a shame and all that. But I mean, again, Dos Anjos, just to praise him, he looked phenomenal, man.
Yep.
He really did.
I think that might be the best I've ever seen Dos Anjos look. I can't think. In terms of a complete performance, I think since he won the lightweight title, that's his best outing. And, I mean, what does this do for Dos Anjos? His career, it looked great, but he's beat a guy, I mean, a really tough guy, but a guy coming up for featherweight last minute. So, I think if he'd beat Fiziev in that manner, it would have been a much bigger victory for him.
Aye.
But you can't argue that he looked sensational in that fight. So I'm really interested to see what they do with him. Main event, Colby Covington, Jorge Masvidal, the grudge match from hell. This one was straight out of pro wrestling.
Like I've been saying for weeks, mate, that is the most pro wrestling thing I've ever seen in MMA.
Aye.
The build up, the feud, as it were.
Yep. The utterly shite patter, as you put it, from...
Oh, I mean, this was something I texted you guys. Oh, the pre-fight press conference was embarrassing. I mean, you say some stupid things against your enemy and all that because you're fighting them and all that, but see to hit the "you're a deadbeat dad" patter to Masvidal. Mm-hmm. I mean, listen, I'm sure if he's a good dad or a bad dad, that's nothing to do with me. That's that guy's personal life. Mm-hmm. But I can't explain enough how much I don't give a fuck about how he is as a dad when he's a fighter. As long as he's not some sort of child abusing, Wayne battering guy, I don't care. It's nothing to do with me. He is a fighter. Mm-hmm. He's an MMA fighter. Why do we need to bring that into it? It brings the sport in general down a notch. It trashes it. It's like Jerry Springer, Maury Povich, shite.
Yep.
Shite is what it is. But anyway, that's not it. Giving it airspace is giving it far too much respect for me, mate. It really is.
Aye, I can see that. So, I mean, pageantry aside, moving into the fight, it was a letdown for me, to be honest.
I could see where you come from. I mean, routine kind of performance like for Covington, leaning on his strengths, wasn't he? He's talked all this shit kind of into the fight, and then he's just went in there and just used his wrestling to nullify Masvidal's game, which it's the sensible thing to do in terms of if you're coming up with a game plan for the easiest way to get past him, wrestle. Don't try and strike with him, but if you're going to go to the bother of making all the threats and saying all the nonsense that Covington's been coming out with, then surely you've got to at least try and back that up and strike a bit. Aye. I mean, like you say, if this is a championship fight for the UFC title, in which you're wanting to be the champion of the world, which obviously every fighter's going to want that at some point in their career, then yes, play to your strengths and do what you're best at. Wrestle fuck, as it were, which is Colby Covington's kind of great strength, is the ability to wrestle fuck a fight into the ground and dominate, which is what he done for quite large portions of the fight. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to chat all the shite, then, I mean, you've wasted everybody's time for me in a lot of ways. And I felt, I feel you there. I get what you're saying there with that. It's a frustrating fight, I think, would be the best way to describe it.
I'm for words on it.
Aye.
It's just, I mean, I can see why Covington's fighting like that, coming off the back of getting tuned up for Usman. He wants to get a marquee win in terms of a big name win rather than a marquee win in terms of his performance, but he wants to get a win over a big name, move himself back towards the title picture. Fair enough. It's the simplest, easiest road to victory for him, to use his wrestling. I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. It was a bad stylistic matchup for Masvidal. Covington has a massive wrestling advantage, so it makes total sense. It's just I just really have this notion that, you know, some people would say that the way he talks and shitstorm that he brings in terms of his word choice and the way he digs into folk as if he's a heel straight out of pro wrestling. Some people would say that there's no place for that in professional fighting. For me, it's all right to a degree as long as you don't cross the line. I mean, you shouldn't be bringing a guy's family into it. That's one thing. But then the other thing is that you should be backing it up. You know what I mean? If you're telling somebody over and over that you're going to break their jaw, or you're going to break their nose, or you're going to keep them a doing, or whatever it is, then don't then proceed to go into the fight and just hit takedown after takedown after takedown and no cause any damage to the person. You know what I mean? Try and follow up with what you're saying, otherwise why bother saying it?
I mean, that's the one thing after 5 rounds. Did any of the guys look particularly damaged physically?
I think
by the fight?
You could easily say that Covington looked worse than Masvidal.
Aye, because obviously Masvidal works his strengths. He's going to strike, he's going to punch, and he's wobbled him like big. I mean, that for me, that's why you could say it's been Masvidal's fight to lose, because he's not immediately capitalised on the chicken leg and gets straight in and tope him. So I would probably say that's where he's lost the fight.
No, I had an opportunity
more than Covington's won it by, like,
that was what, 4th round?
Fourth round. He's kind of banged him one, and Covington's kind of took a wee dodgy kind of step, kind of nearly fell over with it, but kind of managed to kind of stay on his feet.
Yep.
But I felt like at that opportunity, probably Masvidal's going to look back and think, why did I not turn the pressure on there? Maybe he's tired at the point and he's running short on the gas a wee bit.
Yep.
So he's not been able to, but that there was a monster opportunity to finish the fight, I think, if he'd have stuck the pressure on.
Yeah. So, slightly disappointing performance from Masvidal. Disappointing to see Covington no follow through what he's talking about and just go back to being a wrestler. So a wee bit of what's the word? An anticlimax for the main event.
Aye, definitely anticlimactic.
But nevertheless, Covington picks up a unanimous decision win, comfortably gets past Masvidal. But I mean, I don't know what his place is in that division now. I mean, right, okay, I need to mention, he's called out, after the fight, he's called out Dustin Poirier. So obviously the big thing about Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal was that they're former friends and training partners. There's a similar dynamic, never quite as good of friends as they two were, but there's a similar dynamic between Colby Covington and Dustin Poirier, somebody else who's trained with him at ATT. So Covington's now called out Poirier, who, I mean, Dustin's been pretty vocal about what he thinks of Covington and the persona that he's had for the last few years, being this kind of MAGA guy. So, whether that fight happens or no, I don't know. Dustin's kind of twilight his career in a sense. He's had his chances at the title. He's had some big fights. He's on I mean, it seems a wee bit unfair to say it, but I think I have to describe it as an inflated contract because he's running title fights, Dustin. So it kind of makes sense for him. Like, if he's going to have another few fights before he retires, they might as well be big kind of main event pay-per-view fights. And
I mean, I think that's where his ceiling is now, is kind of feudal kind of fights as opposed to chasing a title now.
Yep. So there's a certain amount of sense in making that fight, but the biggest problem is that Dustin's a guy that's predominantly fought at featherweight. The last few years he's been campaigning at lightweight, successfully I might add, other than the fact that he lost to Oliveira for the title. But, well, obviously he got kind of ragdolled by Khabib as well, didn't he? But they two fights aside, he's done very well at lightweight. I mean, I don't know how I see him doing it welterweight. He's got an interesting style for a guy like Covington. Poirier's a very good grappler. He's very dangerous in scrambles. He's got, no in recent years, but there was a time where Dustin Poirier had the record for that. Was it that? I'm sure it was Darce chokes in the UFC.
All right.
He was very, very good at catching them in a scramble. Somebody goes for a takedown, he sprawls, locks in a Darce choke, rolls them up, chokes him. So makes me think that he would be a threat to Covington, but Covington would have a bit of a size advantage there.
So his eyes a wee bit bigger, obviously.
He's a bigger guy, so I don't know. I don't know if I love the fight, but it does make a certain amount of sense. So we'll see what happens there. Other than that, I don't know where Covington fits into that division now. However, I would like to see him against Chimaev. I would like to see what Chimaev could do with him.
I think I would enjoy that. I'm not going to lie. I think unleash Chimaev on him and show him a bit of humility.
Aye.
Would probably do him a bit of
come down a peg or two, potentially.
Oh, and I think he's at that point now where he's stupid enough to mouth off enough to want the fight. And as we have seen, mouthing off at a Dagestani is a dangerous tactic.
Not the wisest move.
No, they will make you pay more than you put in.
So, very quickly before we call it a day, because even though there's just the 2 A's, we're still managing to run out of time here.
Many things to
arguably overrun. But anyway, next week we have 2 fight cards in MMA. We have Bellator 276. The main event is Adam Borix versus Mads Burnell. Not too much happening. It's not the biggest card ever. Only thing I'll say there is co-main event. We've got the return of Phil Davis, Mr. Wonderful Phil Davis. He's taking on Julius Angelicus, who is very good in his own right, I must say. So that is happening March the 12th. I believe that's the Saturday night. So this Saturday coming, Bellator 276. Also on the Saturday we have UFC Vegas 50. We have a fun light heavyweight scrap in the main event there. We have Thiago Santos versus Magomed Ankalaev. That should be a good one. Let's just run up through and see if we get any big fights or fun fights jumping out. Alex Pereira and Bruno Silva should be good. Drew Dober, Terence McKinney's interesting. Terence McKinney stepped in on, I think, something like 12 days' notice or something. He's a late replacement there. We've got Khalil Roundtree against Carl Robertson. That's a good fight there. Khalil Roundtree's a kind of Thai boxer style, so that'll be a good one. Sadiq Youssef and Alex Caceres, great fight. Co-main event, Marlon Moraes and Song Yadong, great fight. That's a title. I think anyway that'll be a title eliminator. At bantamweight, I want to say 135, and then obviously Thiago Santos and Magomed Ankalaev. So aye, good set of fights. Nothing earth-shattering happening next week, but there should be some fun fights in the world of MMA. So,
tremendous.
Any final thoughts, Paul?
Really, the minute you said feed Covington to Chimaev, I'm gonna wish for it daily. I'm gonna wish for it daily, and hopefully it's gonna come true. And if it does, well, the world can thank me for it.
So,
aye, maybe one
the talk is that I don't believe contracts are signed, but the talk is that Chimaev's going to be taking on Gilbert Burns in a couple of months.
Oh, that should be a
so that should be a very interesting fight. That will really let us know where Chimaev's at.
If he's really all that, effectively.
If Chimaev gets past Burns, I feel like he's almost ahead of Covington at that point. So I think it really depends what's happening with Usman at that point, whether or no Chimaev goes straight to title shot or whether it makes sense at that point to do him in Covington. I don't know. But time will tell. Usman, for what it's worth, well, he's due to fight Leon Edwards later in the year. I think start of the summer is what they're targeting. And then he keeps talking about fighting Canelo Alvarez in a boxing match in September. He wants to do it for the Mexican Independence Day thing. He's wanted a big fight. I don't know if that's going to happen or no. I don't think so. I don't really fancy his chances either, if I'm being honest. But anyway.
No.
So, we'll wait and see what Usman's doing. That'll kind of determine what the rest of the division does. So, anywho, thank you very much for joining me, Paul. At least Marina is here.
Hey.
If you have been, thank you very much for listening. Remember, check out the website, midweekmashedtattie.com. We're constantly looking to update that. We're always working on stuff there. You can read about the hosts. You can see a bit about the show. We've recently added a sponsors and affiliates page. So there's a couple of links there that are affiliate links for us. If you're thinking about making any purchases or whatever else that pertains to them, if you use our links, it doesn't cost you anything extra, but it helps us out. And ultimately, the biggest thing you can do for us is spread the word. Tell your friends, tell your family members, let everybody know about the show, and thank you. So I've been Mick, he's been Paul, Harvey's not been here. See you again next week.
Yes.
Bye, driver.
Ciao.